Hello, my name is Olivia Kim, and I'm an adjunct professor at the Rochester Institute of Technology. I'm a figure sculptor by trade, and I'm the owner of Olivia Kim Studio. I've been specializing in body movement for the past decade, and I'd have to say I've found a technique to be able to capture split-second motion. But before you even really start with movement, you really have to learn the basics. My basic training in figure sculpture is thanks to the Florence Academy of Art. That's a school in Florence, Italy, which is world-renowned for its realist figure sculpture and painting. At the time, I was studying with the director of the sculpture program. His name is Robert Bodem, and many of the techniques here are coming from his books that he's written on figure sculpture, and you'll be able to find them on the internet pretty easily. So how does one set up for a figure sculpture? We have already gone over how to create the armature, but I want to go over the rest of the setup so that you have a very consistent and very easy kind of setup, which will allow you to work very well, very efficiently, and with very few bumps, okay? I'm sure some of you guys may have noticed that if your setup is not consistent or it's kind of all over the place, you can actually waste a lot of time and energy, and in unfortunate cases find that your perspective of your reference photo or your sculpture maybe was off, and then sometimes you gotta cut things off or you gotta add things on. So it can be a really painful kind of experience. So we're trying to save ourselves from that. So here on this board, you can see the photos of our model, and you're gonna see the very basic, it's actually 4 viewpoints that you're seeing right now. That one is just where our model's pulling up his arms so you can see the real shape of his torso. But essentially you're seeing 4 viewpoints of the model. And this is essentially corresponding to the 4 planes of what is described as a pelvic box. So if you were to simplify the pelvis, you're gonna find that there's going to be a front plane, okay? Front plane here. There's going to be 2 side planes, and then there's going to be a back plane, okay? So this is all corresponding with the reference packet that I've created for you. Here you can see that I have the 4 basic viewpoints of the model in photos, and then I also have the 3/4 view or the 1/8 viewpoint angles right here. But then you're gonna see these handouts which I've created. Now, the illustrations are coming from the book Artistic Anatomy by Dr. Jean-Paul Richet, excuse me, by Dr. Paul Richet. He'd roll around in his grave for, because I messed up his name, but Dr. Paul Richet. Now, he was a French surgeon, and his illustrations and descriptions in this Artistic Anatomy book are quite famous. Because he was a surgeon, he really knew what he was talking about, and he really described the body very accurately. So here you can see his illustrations. Now, on top of those illustrations, you're gonna see my addition to his illustrations, which essentially map out and describe exactly where you're going to find reference points, specific skeletal reference points on the body. Now you can see some of them on this model right here. You can see there's a piece of tape right here. It demarcates the point at which the sternocleidomastoidus connects. You can see it right here. And it also just represents a point where it's just skin that covers the skeleton, okay? So we're trying to look for reference points that describe where the skeleton is most consistent. okay? So that means it's places where it's not covered with muscle. Um, the whole body, I mean, actually, underneath the skin, there is a layer of fat. And this fat can have various thicknesses and thinnesses. So it's not really, it's always going to be a mixed bag. When you look at a figure, you're going to be thinking about where these skeletal reference points are on the body, but also how the skin and the layer of fat will be sometimes either obscuring those areas, but for the most part, they should actually be just the thinnest area of skin and fat over those sections. So my anatomy additions, right, to Richet's illustrations, are all arranged in a very specific way. So you see how this torso, right, the upper front torso view is right above the front torso, excuse me, the frontal view of our model. So this here just shows how you can have anatomy placed in such a way that it's very helpful, okay? So when I'm sculpting, I could be looking at our model's torso and then flipping my eyes up and seeing the anatomical drawing as well. So this makes everything very easy to work with. If you have a big jumble of illustrations and photos and they're all over the place, it can actually take a lot of energy and concentration away from you to search for them. I find that if I place everything very close to each other in a way that makes sense, see here, the bottom part of the front view of the leg, okay, the bottom part of the body, the front view of the leg right there, is also directly beneath the frontal view of our model. This is how I can place things so that my eyes can go up, go down, go up, go down, and be able to kind of link together and create this kind of crossing nexus in my mind of this area right here, this is what the anatomy looks like, this is how the model looks like, and I can think about how the highlights and the roundness of the volumes of the form, right, that you see in the photograph are corresponding with the arrangement of the muscle fibers and the muscle bundles, right, and the muscle groups, and also where the tendons are. You can see where there are depressions in the body where let's say the skin is thinner because it's pulling right around a tendon, okay? So, so here you're going to have side view of the leg, and then the same side view of that leg in anatomy, and thus you can just keep, you know, moving your eyes around, but it's always like in a straight line. That way you can go here, you can go there, up, down, side, side, and be able to have this sensation of things moving and turning, especially in the central row of photos. And then also be able to flip up and down and kind of start to think as if you have X-ray eyes, okay? So that's just the photo references. You can put it on a wall. I like to put it on a board. I happen to be lucky and I have an easel. So this easel right here, I can adjust it up or down so that the height of my sculpture, okay, can be at the mid-height of my eyes, and then also have the photo be, it's actually a little bit low right now, have it at mid-height to the sculpture as well. That way everything is very consistent. Perspective is not an issue, right? So when you have all these setups in mind, and just get it done in the beginning, afterwards you don't have to mess with it. Now, so I have a sculpture stand here, and you can see that it rotates. Now, if you don't have that, you can use a table. You can get very thick books and just stack them up. It doesn't really matter if it's uneven. I mean, if it's slightly uneven, it's okay. If it's unstable, that's an issue. So you really should make sure it's stabilized. If you have something like a cardboard box and then you want to place the armature on top, so that you don't want to be hunching, right? You want to be able to to either stand upright or be like this and moving around, okay? So there are various ways to move around this sculpture. Now, if you have a cardboard box, the tendency is that maybe you could slide around, and that will create stress because whenever you push on the clay and on the armature, it's gonna jiggle around. So you don't want that. If you have, let's say, an empty cardboard box, I suggest you put some heavy books inside, and that will help to make the box feel more stable. It's not going to slide around much, and you once again will have a nice stable structure to work on top of. So we have the setup of the armature, okay? Now, like I said, if you have books or cardboard box, you might not have a very level surface to work off of. So you're going to use these wedges, which are used for spacing tiles. You can get these at a local hardware store, and you just use these to level out your armature. I like to have this kind of bullseye type of bubble level. This is really good, so you can see there's a little bubble of air right there. So when you place it on your armature base, you can really check to see if the bubble is centered right in the center circle, you'll be able to get a nice level sculpture. Now, when you're using something like a board like this, you're gonna wanna use a larger bubble level, one that will get the horizontal correct, okay? If you have an easel, you're gonna have to look at the easel on the side profile and make sure that the easel is not leaning forward or it's not leaning back, okay? That way you have a nice vertical. So once again, it's all about consistent setup. Now, you're gonna have this kind of setup, right? Now, once you have all of this, okay, you can pretty much begin, okay? You pretty much visually have everything ready, and then it's just a matter of having the tools ready. But when you start to develop more, you might want to try these options as well. This is also a set of options for people who do not have this, okay? So you can have two different kinds of board, okay? This right here is good for something like a portrait shot, okay? If you, and then also once again, if you don't have a board like this or a wall space that you can work on, you can also just put your image right on this. You want to have a board that's nice and flat. If it's wavy, it could cause problems once again, okay? So you want to tape this onto a nice straight board, and then in this way, because it's light, it's very easy for you to hold it. Okay, you could hold it if you're, you could hold it with your weaker hand and then just sculpt, okay? You want to be sure that you're not holding it at an angle. You want to be sure that when you look at this, this is going to be, let's say we're looking at the face, your eyes are going to be mid-height to the actual entire face, entire head, right? And you also want to make sure that the plane of this, the plane of this board is going to be parallel with your eyes, okay? And obviously you want to be sure you tape this on all four corners, okay? So that's one way to work. Now, some of you may opt to print out larger photos. And these photos, if you actually have the ability to do that, you can size it so that it accounts for, so that is the actual dimensions of your sculpture, okay? So we're talking about 1/4 scale. So if you have that, you can use a board like this, and you see that I've cut it just halfway through its thickness, and then I snapped it in half, okay? So it bends like that. Now, if you want to have an actual scale photo right next to it, you can do this as well. So you put the photo right here. Let's say this is the entire figure. And you can have this sitting right next to the sculpture. You want to make sure that the height of your figure is at the level that it should be. This armature in particular accounts for a 1-inch high base. So you want to be sure that your photo is placed at that height. And then you can actually sculpt like this, all right? So if, let's say I was sitting, I would want to, I'm gonna move this. So if I was sitting and I had my figure here, I would be facing forward like this. And then when I turn my head, right, I'm going to be sure that the angle of this is going to be parallel to my eyes as well. So if you're looking at a bird's eye view, it's not like you're going to be seeing it like this, right? You're going to be seeing it like that. So it's kind of like almost like creating an arc, so that when I turn my head, I'll be looking like this, turning my head, and having my eyes parallel to that. So that's one way you can work. Another way is you could have your photo back here. You'd have it back here as well. This is if you make an image that's larger than your sculpture. That way you can place it either forward or back, okay, behind the armature base. And then that way you can literally copy how tall and how wide this figure should look, all right? So this only works when you're looking at the sculpture from as if it was like on a flat plane. And in the beginning, you're going to be looking at the front, sides, and back plane views, all right? So for the setup, this actually could really work out very well. For some of you who have a smaller image, okay, so let's say this is the model, all right? If you have a smaller image, you could actually place it so that it's farther forward and that the scale of, here, let me see if I can hold this. Yeah, so you see how I have this right here? You can have this so that the image is placed farther forward, and you see I'm going to be standing farther away from the sculpture now, right? So you can have it so that this is set up just like sight size as well, except for it's the reverse. Instead of being behind the armature, you're going to have the image in front. And then that way you can look side to side and compare to see if the size is the same scale that you see it as. That's the meaning of sight size, okay? So that's another way of working as well. And you can have this leaning on, resting on another piece of furniture or a box, or I don't know what you're gonna do, okay? You could tape it to a tripod, okay? But you can have this so that you can make a very convenient sight size setup. Okay, so another alternative, I just want to keep going because you know what? You don't know what you have. You can do it with a binder as well, okay? So same thing, binder. Okay, if you have a portrait, you could have multiple views. You could cut out your photos and put them all on there and then use that as well. That way you have like a nice convenient kind of board with all the various angles of the same portrait. You know, it goes on. You can make stuff up, but hopefully this will give you a good idea of the basic setup, and obviously you're going to probably make something new up. I'm totally fine with that as long as it works. Okay, thank you.